Oh, we are live this morning. Good morning, everybody. I'm excited and a little rattled this morning. A little short backstory here. I tried to restart my computer before I went live, and all of a sudden it had to do a firmware update, and that took about 15 minutes. So we're just a couple minutes behind here, but I'm super excited to have Derek on the show. If you don't know Derek, that's okay. You'll get to know him today on the show. Derek and I have been trying to get this together for almost 2 months. Things just work a little slower when you got coronavirus going on. But Derek is the host of the Data Binge Podcast. He's been doing that for a number of years. And he loves to talk about the behind the scenes of how and why you create shows. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But I'm going to toss it over. I always get my arrows wrong. I'm going to toss it over to Derek to tell us a little bit about himself and give himself some background. And Derek, feel free to brag here. This is where you get to tell people how great you are.
Thanks, Ryan. So it's funny with the harder start that you were experiencing this morning. I think that's completely 100% natural and happens probably every single time I do a show. It's something always goes wrong. It's like Murphy's Law. Just a quick anecdote. Yesterday, we were doing a live broadcast about experiencing anti-racism with virtual reality. We had a couple professors on, Columbia University and Stanford University. And the Stanford University professor, Jeremy Bailenson, he's a professor of communication. And the first thing that he kind of mentions in our prep talk right before we press live is, you know what? This, from a communication perspective, I study this setup is just not good. And it was amazing feedback, but it was right before we went live. So it's like that, having that anxiety right before you press the live button. And it worked out tremendously well. We were able to fix it to where he really wanted the angles to be and the images to be when we went live. So it worked out, but these things happen. So Derek Russell, I'm a data and AI specialist at Microsoft's West region. So I support high-tech engineering, software, and power and utilities customers in how they can leverage the power of their data estate to create innovation and disruption that empowers their employees and their customers. So everything from data ingestion, where you store data, how it's reasoned against with machine learning and artificial intelligence, and then how it's distributed to their end consumers and applications via advanced analytics and Power BI, which is our visualization tooling. So that's what I do at Microsoft. I also am the host of this podcast, the Data Binge Podcast, that I've been doing for about 3 years now. I'm also a co-host of a live program we just created, myself and a colleague of mine, Ali Mazaheri. He's the director of the Microsoft Technology Center, both in Denver and in Irvine. And that show is about talking about the evolving landscape of tech, specifically with Microsoft partners, colleagues, employees, and customers. And yesterday we had a couple academics on to talk about VR. So I'm doing that as sort of a stretch projects just to keep me, I guess, insane when I'm trying to capture the day-to-day. I was recruited into Microsoft from a full-time MBA program at the University of Texas in Austin, Macomb School of Business. So I do not have a technology background. I have more of an environmental engineering, environmental health and safety background. Really wanted to get into technology, really wanted to get into the automotive industry. I wanted to work for Tesla at some point, but then I got married. My wife got pregnant. Things changed. Needed to work for a bigger organization with a culture that I could believe was going to be good for my family. Started reading some books about cloud computing and AI, really got pulled into it, and here I am today. So thanks for that.
Hey, well, that's good. A couple of comments on that. One, you mentioned Ali. He's watching the show. He's from Irvine, California. Another thing, it's super early where you are. It's 6:30 in the morning.
Yeah, he's an early riser.
Yeah, I'm in the central time zone, so it's 8:30. It's a little more reasonable time to get up. You mentioned the live show that you did yesterday. I think we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show, just because it's interesting. The topic there and the concept of putting together those live shows is something I want to talk about. But before we get too far into those topics, I always run people through, I think it's 4 questions just so the audience can get to know you better, you already know the first question because I put it up on LinkedIn this week.
Yeah.
How many cups of coffee do you have per week?
I typically have about 20 cups.
All right. And so now I have a little bit of a story. For those of you watching on LinkedIn, I posted this question on LinkedIn this week, and I'm not a coffee drinker, so I don't have any, but I found out that coffee is something people on LinkedIn are very passionate about. And everybody had a comment and everybody had an opinion. Some people only buy it from certain coffee places. Some people roast their own beans. I was kind of blown away at the response to it.
So really quick story on this. I was thinking about this before we jumped on, but when I was in my MBA program, I was drinking like a huge thermos of coffee every single day. And I was super nervous and sweating all the time. I was having these like weird heart things. I was like doubting myself. I had like anxiety and like these weird psychological fears started to come up when I went to go public speak. And I saw a doctor, and the doctor on campus. And I told her my essentially what was going on, symptoms. And she said, "Do you drink coffee?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." She's like, "How much coffee do you drink?" I described that to her, and it blew her mind. She's like, "You need to drink less coffee." My daughter had the same problem when she was in school. I drank half the coffee I was drinking, and all that stuff went away. So be careful how much coffee you drink.
Wow. So for those of you watching, if you drink too much coffee, if you responded to my question and you drink over 50 cups a day or a week, you might need to do something about that.
Stop it. Yeah.
Yeah. One person commented and they said it might be easier just to add the pots of coffee.
Exactly.
All right. Next question. What is your favorite restaurant?
Oh gosh, that's Sushi Town. It's a small Japanese sushi restaurant just down the street from me in Costa Mesa. Incredible sushi, very affordable, and it's got like this hometown, small, villagey Japanese type neighborhood feel that we just absolutely love. And we just order it takeout now because obviously we were not going in there and sitting and eating sushi, but we really enjoy that.
Well, that's cool. I'm not a sushi person, but people always have interesting answers for this question. And since my coffee question on LinkedIn, good, I'll probably ask this question sometime on LinkedIn and see if people have answers for that. All right. If you're a reader, are you a paperback person? Are you an ebook person? Or are you, I guess hardcover could be in there, or are you not a book reader?
Love reading books. I like used paperback and hardback books. You can get them really cheap online. And then I like writing something in the cover and then gifting them to somebody. The cool thing is I've gotten books from others that already had an inscription from a past reader's gift to someone else years and years ago. So that's really cool when you can kind of put your little note beneath their note and send it to somebody. But predominantly I'm a Kindle reader. Love Kindle. Got to do it.
That's kind of a cool story there of writing a note in there and passing it on. I also like the tip of buying used books because they're cheaper, and I don't know, used books, there's a story behind everything. And especially if you write notes in there, that's kind of cool.
And the Kindle thing is cool. If people don't understand this, you can get the Paperwhite for used for like $50. Some of the stuff you can get like for free on Amazon. If you have an Amazon account, you can get books for free. And then you can also get books for free from your local library by using Libby, the Libby app or the OneDrive app. Microsoft has their own library. So I get books from them from free. I get books from the local Newport Beach library for free. Like, it's the best way to save money and read a ton of books.
I have used the library to get books. I've even interlibrary loaned a few books from my library, my local library. So it does work well there. All right, let's jump into our next question. Growing up, what career did you want to have?
I think I wanted to be a cop, which is probably not the best answer to like right now. But I wanted to be a policeman. You know, I looked at policemen like they were just these big heroes, and I grew up on action movies and really wanted to stop crime. And that's what I really wanted to be growing up.
There's nothing wrong with wanting to be a cop or being a cop. That may have been in my dreams when I was a little kid at some point, but
It's great. Really appreciate all the work that the police around the world are doing today, by the way.
Well, yeah, it's good. And it like you alluded to, it's not I don't know if I want to say it's not a great time for cops. Cops are getting a little more attention, and for good reason the last couple of months.
Yeah, as they should be. And if anyone wants to have that conversation, let's definitely have it. I'm constantly trying to create content around Black Lives Matter and creating some more proximity to the challenges that the Black community is experiencing today. So tons of stuff to be talked about there.
It is a big topic, and I don't know how much we're going to touch on it here, but yeah. So if you're out there, you want to do a show, you want to talk about that, Derek, you can talk to Derek. So at the end, we'll tell you how to get a hold of Derek. We got a couple of comments here. Dr. Travis Perry is watching. Great stuff. I can't even figure out how to pronounce his name. Go Palin. Well, thanks for watching, and sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. A couple of other things. We're going to jump into the content that we want to talk about. I call this the example show because months ago when I started it, I had heard people talking about how you can just create a show and you can turn it into a podcast and you can live stream it and people will watch it and it works. And I thought, well, I want to try to do this. And so I just called it the example show of how to do that. And as the show has evolved over the last couple of months, I've realized I'm starting to focus more on talking to people that have created shows and podcasts. So that's what we talk about a lot on this show now. And for this one, we're talking with Derek, and there's a ton of topics I could talk with Derek about, and we're probably going to talk about a bunch of them. But one of the ones I really wanted to focus on was the why of creating a show. But even before we get into the why, first question here, talk us through what was it like when you first started your podcast, and like start us from the beginning.
Yeah. So I think what happened was I got hired into Microsoft, and again, I didn't have a technology background. I had more of a business sales strategy background. And I was not only was I insecure about the fact that I didn't understand anything about coding, infrastructure, things like SQL Server databases, had zero knowledge, absolutely zero. I just had the passion to learn about it and really loved the tech industry all up. And as I started to talk to folks, literally my first year at Microsoft was just interviewing friends and colleagues and people that I work with closely on what these different technologies were. Help me understand, what does this mean? I would reach out to some of these coworkers, and super great people, and they would take the time to explain these basic concepts to me. And at some point, I realized that I'm not the only person on the planet that doesn't understand these really tough concepts, especially, in terms of onboarding new employees, folks that are being hired out of MBA programs, diverse and inclusive talent that just don't have those types of backgrounds. And focusing on those types of interviews, I thought was important. And then I connected with someone, I believe the name of their podcast was The Ultimate Guide to Partnering. I need to reconnect with that team to establish ourselves. I think they're going to come on my podcast in the future, but they were able to give me that proximity to, hey, why don't you just focus on a podcast yourself, Derek? You're already interviewing these folks. And they just gave me this inception of this idea. Maybe it could be for your technical people in your region, and you could help folks understand, these different concepts. I took that idea, I absolutely ran with it, started interviewing folks at Microsoft, recording it, and it went really well. It was hard at first because there's a lot of unknowns in the process. Like, you're scared, there's imposter syndrome. Like, what the heck do I know? Like, I'm the idiot here. People are going to know that I'm an idiot. When it comes to the self-talk was terrible, right? But I think just doing and execution is the number one. And since then, I've branched off into not just folks that work at Microsoft and not just concepts that surround the specific idea of technology or cloud or AI. So I think just doing it and going through the pain, going to the gym for the first time always sucks. It's never good. You don't look good. You don't feel good. You don't feel like you should be there. But when you go there consistently, there comes a time where you feel like you belong and you're actually good at exercising. So that's kind of the parallel that I make between those two things.
Right. So that's cool that you started just doing. Were you doing the interviews before they recorded? Were you doing them phone calls or were you doing them via Skype?
At the time it was Skype. So that was before we had Teams. So or in person, like literally handing someone an expo pen and saying, we love whiteboarding. Can you whiteboard this out? Like, what is a processor? What is a server? Like, why are we selling licenses? Like, what's the purpose of this? What is the cloud? Can you help me understand what a distributed database is? All those different things I didn't understand. I was asking these. I was really curious, and literally, I'm thinking this entire time, oh my gosh, how do I capture this data for myself? Like, I was videoing. I was taking audio recordings of it, and then re-listening to it at the gym, just to literally. I didn't even tell my boss about this, but there's multiple times that he gave me these lectures about how to do certain things in the business. And I would record him and I probably shouldn't be sharing this and not tell him. And then later I would re-listen to it multiple times over and be like, oh my God, like, what does that mean? And then literally rewind it or press the rewind button, have my wife listen to I'm like, what is he talking about here? What does he mean? And my wife would listen to him like, I think he means that. It was that difficult, some of the concepts to learn. And that's what gave me the idea of I need to record this. I need to share it because there's going to be significant impact, not only for myself, but for others. So I think that initial motivation was definitely absolutely learning.
Well, that's good. There was one tip in there that you kind of threw over, the recording meetings. And in Teams, if you don't know this, every time you have a Teams meeting, you can go click on the options and you can click record the meeting. And this is a great tip, especially if you have important meetings with work colleagues or with your boss, and they're going to give you a list of requirements of things you need to do. Instead of trying to take notes, if you just hit that record button, you can do that, and then you can go rewatch the show and or rewatch the meeting and pull out all those notes. I don't know, that's something I've been doing the last couple of months, and it seems to be working very well for me. But next one, so you transitioned from you wanted to learn how to do this to now I'm going to start recording these and turning it into a podcast. At the beginning, did you have any real reasons for why you wanted to create this show? Did you want to become a famous podcaster? Did you just want to share out this knowledge with other people? Like, why did you, other than someone brought you the idea to podcast, what was the why behind your podcast?
I think inherently it was learning. It was challenging myself personally. It was challenging myself. I knew that to do this, I would learn just a tremendous amount. And then it would provide this forcing function to enter this platform and to own this platform with others and to build this community where I could then reach out and have a reason for reaching out. And it would, again, this forcing function of allowing me or having me learn on the fly something that was really difficult, and then creating this library of discussions is essentially what I call the Data Binge Podcast, a library of discussions with technologists and business leaders focused on the human relationship with technology. So how do you build this library of discussions? And when you think about it that way, it makes sense. Like, I have a library here in my office. I love going to the library. It's great when you need to have some capture of knowledge and you have it at your every whim. You can have it accessible anytime that you need it. So I think that idea of building that library was just really cool to me. And then that's why I wanted to start. So it was essentially build a library, use it for yourself, number one, and number two, share it with others so you can have additional impact.
Yeah, that's very similar to why I decided to start the Example Show. I wanted to practice live streaming and interviewing of people. And I thought, this is interesting. I'm just going to record these. I'm going to live stream them, give myself some practice live streaming, talk to interesting people, and make a collection of those things. Like all these videos, they're all on YouTube, and there are mini snippets that I put all over the internet. But it's having that collection of resources that's helpful to me, talking to people like you who have done these things before and have a little bit of knowledge and experience in how to do this is great. And having a library of that stuff available and that information is good. So that's neat. So similar thing we have going on there.
And I'm sure, Ryan, like for your in your example, you're learning, you're interviewing all these folks about how to start a show. I'm willing to bet that you're pretty damn good at knowing what it's like to start a show, or you know what it takes. You probably have, like, you're not just this robot that's collecting these artifacts and these videos and then just distributing them. Like, you're learning in real time pretty exponentially. And I think that learning process is something that a lot of folks that are looking to start a podcast or show, I don't think if they're starting it for the wrong reasons, or they're starting it for reasons that don't identify with themselves personally, they don't really capture that idea that they're going to really learn quite a bit. And that learning is, I think, the most valuable part about the entire process. Yeah.
Couple points on that. The whole learning thing, it kind of goes with whatever topic you have or you want to learn. Because I have a large background in data science. And one of the best things, people always ask me, how do I get into data science, or how do I get there? And I learned this from Brandon Rohrer, who always said, just start building a project.
Facebook, right?
Yeah, just pick out whatever project it is, and you're gonna, suppose you want to study traffic in your street, in your city. The first thing you got to do is you got to go find that data, and you have to figure out, where do I even go for this data? Is it available on an open data platform? And then once you get it, you got to realize, how am I going to analyze this? And if you just focus on the next step, you're just going to continue down this project that you picked out and is interesting. And 6 months later, you'll have this laundry list of things you learned how to do. But if you just create a checklist at the beginning and say, I want to learn this check, it's not as motivating because it's just a big checklist. Whereas if you choose an interesting project, you just learn some new things every week, and you're just getting one step farther in your project. And yeah, it's similar. It's similar to hosting a show. 2 months ago, I didn't know a whole lot about doing live streaming and getting things going. Now I know quite a bit more. I'm not an expert, but here's something I've started to talk about a little bit more. I see there are really like 3 types of shows, and you had kind of mentioned this in your why. I say there are hobby shows and people who put on shows around their hobby. Whatever it is, their hobby is, whether that is football, fishing, sewing, whatever. It's just a hobby show. It's something they really like to do, and they want to talk about it. Sometimes they have guests, sometimes they don't, but it's a hobby. They're not planning to make any money. They're not trying to sell you something. It's just what they like to do. And then there's what I consider sort of the marketing type of podcast. And that's a lot of times done by a company or an individual. The podcast or the show doesn't make any money, but it helps promote some other product that a company sells. Like Microsoft has a number of these shows going on. Like the AI show that Microsoft puts on, they don't sell anything on the show, but it promotes and talks about the Azure AI suite of tools. And so you can watch the show to learn about the tools, and eventually Microsoft thinks people are going to buy Azure products and know how to use them and spend more money. So it's kind of a marketing show, and you don't have to be big like Microsoft to do that. Little companies and small businesses do it as well. And then there's the other type where the show actually is the final product. And this is sort of similar to TV shows, but these types of shows sell some advertising, or they have some affiliate marketing associated with them. But the show is the major product that they're trying to create. And when you were talking about having your why, which are your shows different on that list? Does that list of 3 even make sense to you? So, I mean, how would your shows fit into that list?
So it's funny, when you were walking me through that, I was thinking to myself, well, why can't all of those be combined in one show? Why can't all those whys be condensed into one show? And that's typically what I think about it. Like for me, and I wrote this article, and it's basically the how to start a podcast, the go, no go, 3 steps to go, no go on your podcast journey. And it also captures some things you can do from a live broadcast perspective. But I focus it on these 3 specific things that you just have to have. If you're going to start this thing, you're going to invest your time. I brought it up here just to make it clear. And it's how is it aligned to how you make money? And that can come in a whole lot of different ways. It could be it's because you're an AI specialist at Microsoft and you want to focus on AI products and talk to AI people because, hey, you work there in your career and it's how you make money. You better learn how your product stack. You better learn the technology so that you can then go and do your job better. Can you do up to 50? Can you imagine up to 50 episodes on the fly? Like if you can't just imagine 50 episodes that you could potentially do and get excited about it, there's not enough that you currently have around your topic to do the show. And then finally, does the world need this thing? Because if you don't have those 3 pillars, essentially, then I think the average time a podcast may last, I think it's called podcast fatigue now. The average time a podcast may go to is like 13 episodes or something. And I'm pretty sure that they don't go the full length of the time of that they wanted to division this thing because they don't have those 3 concepts down. So does it align with how you make money? You don't have to make money from it, but does it align with how you make money? Does it have something to do with what you do? That does, if you're a real estate person, if you sell real estate, this could be a podcast about flipping houses. Maybe it really has something to do with you specifically selling houses, but you're flipping houses in your real estate business. So how could you talk about that particular concept? Because at some point, it's going to make you better at your real job, or it's going to get you closer to people that are going to help you make more money in your real job. And then at some point, you can make money from that podcast. So I think like when it comes to monetizing, folks really need to think more broadly. And when it comes to trying to figure out why they want to do this thing, I think it could be an aggregate of a lot of different reasons into one show. And I think that's totally okay. As long as the number one why is not, I want to make money from this thing, because that's just not a good way to approach something creatively.
Yeah, I guess I've never thought of you could combine the hobby, the marketing, and sort of they can all be combined into one, I guess.
Yeah, that's what the Data Binge Podcast is. Yeah.
There's probably some truth to the fact that the ones that are aligned to all 3 of those probably are more successful. But I think the hobby portion of it comes from it's something you're just really excited about.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not you make money on it, you just want to keep doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, that's interesting. And Derek briefly mentioned his article he wrote on LinkedIn. I forgot I was going to mention this in the intro, but it's an excellent article on how do you start a podcast. And it covers, it's lengthy, but it covers a lot of great information that you need to know. So if you're new and at the beginning, it's one worth checking out. I don't have a link for it right here. It's on Derek's LinkedIn page, so you can see his name, Derek Russell. Look him up and find it.
Going back to the hobby, Ryan, I think also a hobby, it's such an interesting concept because it could be, there's so many different things that a hobby can be to some person. Like you could be really interested. You could be a gearhead. Like so there's some people that love gear, they love collecting. So you can, maybe the hobby is not even about the content of your show. Maybe your hobby is you like interviewing people. Maybe you like lighting. Maybe you like gear. Maybe you like researching gear. Maybe there's all there's all these different subcomponents of producing a show that are really fun. Reaching out to people, meeting new people, going to networking events, we can't go to conferences now, but building new relationships. So a lot of those substrate, like ancillary things that people like to do can be part of that podcast or live show journey. And I think those are really interesting things as well that people just typically don't think about, that I try to think about as much as possible to continue to fuel the ongoing process of the shows that I'm doing.
Yeah, all that just makes great sense. And we got one comment coming in here. Go Palin wants to know, can you tell me a little bit more about podcast fatigue? I've also heard this as pod fading, meaning you start and you're really excited and I produce one episode every week. And then a month down the road, I'm only producing one every other week. And then it's one a month. And then pretty soon you never make another one again. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So it's like, I don't want to keep on using the gym anecdote, but like, you have to have like that why and that reason for doing the podcast. You have to have a vision of what you're trying to be, who you're trying to be, what you're trying to get to, what you're trying to create. Because without that vision and that end goal, you have nothing that's pulling you or motivating you or inspiring you to get there. So I constantly have this vision of what I want this thing to be. And it's constantly changing it's going to change after this show, just based upon comments and your input, Ryan, and just the things that we're talking about. And again, going back to these three pillars, and that vision is one component, but going back to those three pillars, like you have to be able to conjure up 50 episodes on the fly, or potential 50 episodes on the fly. You have to figure out, like, if you're not making money, again, if you're focusing on a hobby, you're focusing on fly fishing or stamp collecting or whatever, that's great. But the world happens, COVID happens, social unrest happens, kids happen, marriage happens, you lose loved ones. What is going to keep you focused on meeting your objectives and going towards that vision? So I think when it comes to, and I've faced this many, many times with the podcast, where I think I have up to 43 episodes now. And I'm constantly thinking to myself, I could be spending more time with my kids. I could be spending more time reading. I could be spending more time with my friends, but I don't, or I try to circumvent those things and balance them more appropriately, because the end goal for me is very, very clear. And if it's not clear, I know that it will become clear as things continue to progress. So I think those goals are super, super important for when folks are thinking about starting, because I don't think it's worth starting if you're not very purposeful about what you're trying to do. And if you're purposeful about that, I think you have a lesser opportunity of actually fatiguing in the process.
Yeah, there's a lot there. Creating a show or a podcast, it isn't a ton of work, but it is work. And especially things like a live show like this, I do these just about every Friday morning. That means every Friday morning I got to get up and I got to do one of these. I got to line up some speakers. I got to come up with questions. There's not a ton there, but it just has to be done every week. It just doesn't automatically happen. And so a little of that goes into podcast fatigue. And if you don't have your why, it's easy to just skip a week and say, it's okay. Doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But yeah. For my show, I like to say I wanted to learn how to live stream. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm practicing these. I still don't know. Like, I don't know if this example show is going to continue to grow. And I'm already starting to make some training courses on how do you put together a live show. Because what I've done, I've learned a lot in the last 2 months. And I want to title my show, Create Your Own Live Show in 7 days. Because I think you can do your first one in 7 days. And yeah, that's for me. But I don't know if I'm going to end up spinning this out into something later on. I wanted to learn how to do this, and I wanted to put them out on the internet to share with the rest of the world and the other people that are creating shows and want to get better and do more of that. So that's kind of my why. My long-term why is a little bit fuzzy though. So
yeah, I think that's okay. I think that's good actually, because it could change over time. So I think doing a live broadcast, so with the Simply Tech live broadcast that myself and my colleague are doing, it takes less time for sure. And the cool thing about doing live is there's no scripting. Like you agree on a subset of ideas and questions, and boom, you get into it. And it's very organic. It's authentic. It's two people talking in a coffee shop, and then the recording is just a fly on the wall. And it's a great way for people to get started, right? with the podcast, I think it's a little bit more work. I think I put in probably 6 hours of work per episode, including the time of the recording, just because you're editing with audio. Things have to be absolutely perfect because there is no video to capture with it. There's only one medium of kind of consuming the content. You want to make sure that it's clean. You want to take the ums out. Like there's all these different things that you need to research and ask great questions, where I feel like almost in a live engagement, we can just do this. You know, we can, I think it's a different setup. And then there's the thing about consistency. I think consistency for me, and you probably may disagree, and I think Sam Charrington had some great thoughts on consistency. He was from one of your past shows.
Yep.
It's really hard for me to be consistent. It's really hard to have a routine where you have people that you're engaging with authentically, and you need to schedule those engagements with them. And then when you have a family and you have kids, you're right. Like you have a full-time job. Like how do you, like on that this Friday morning, right when we get off this show, I'm going to have to give an executive presentation to a customer like 30 minutes later. So what if that got moved to this time? You have to cancel. Yeah. You know what I mean? So like at some point, I think I was really hard on myself about consistency, and my wife, she's like my guiding light in my life, and like my coach for all things. She's like, you know what, honey, like you just got to do whatever. You just got to do as much as you can. You know, like you can't do an episode every Sunday. Like do your best. And that was great advice. I'm like, okay, well, doing your best feels a lot better than, nope, you got to be consistent. You got to release 2 episodes a week for 5 years. You know, so I think there's a lot of nuance in those different conversations as well.
It can go either way on that. So last week I actually didn't record one of these. A couple weeks before it, I didn't have a guest set up for Friday, and about a week before it, I said, you know what, I don't have a guest, and I'm just not going to do it because I'm not really ready. I don't have anybody to speak, and I'm going to spend my week doing some other things that I needed to catch up on. But yes, the consistency is important because people know you're going to show up every week or multiple times a week, and life happens, things happen. It doesn't, you can't always stay consistent. So it can go both ways. I would agree with you. Don't beat yourself up over the fact that you can't be 100% consistent, because having a full-time job, family and kids, and you know, if you volunteer, there's lots of other things going on in people's lives, and you can't control them all.
Totally agree with that.
All right. So I know we've texted about this a little bit in preparation for the show, but what are some of the benefits you have seen to yourself and to maybe your career from creating a show?
Yeah, so that has actually been very vast. I think in a very short amount of time, and going back to this I can't emphasize the learning. Like if you're a new employee or you're coming into a new career and you really want to get closer to people that you work with and broaden your network, understand the product stack that your company may be representing or building, engineering, selling, whatever, like the best way to do that is to start creating content with guests that work at the place that you call your career. Going back to resonating or having this align with how you make money. I think for me personally, coming into Microsoft, it would have taken me so much longer. I don't know how my career would have progressed at all. I don't know if I'd still be at Microsoft if I didn't really put myself this very, very challenging task of doing this podcast, like interviewing some great people, helping them to help me understand why these different concepts were important: digital transformation, data science, analytics, like the power of data, all these different things, right? And in that learning process and that interview process, not only did I build these relationships with these great people, and I've had like general managers on, I've had C-suite executives on from different startups, partners of Microsoft, all these different things. But once you do that episode, like we're going to spend this time together today, this is bringing us closer. So you're helping me, I'm helping you, we're helping others by doing this show. And now we're creating this micro community where we can reach out to each other, share resources, introduce ourselves to other people. The same thing happens in organizations. So it's brought me closer to people that I can just message. For instance, I had this woman on, she's been at Microsoft for 20 plus years, super well connected in the AI space. Had her on last year, and I needed a favor. I needed to have one of our CVPs come and give a presentation to one of our customers in very short time. Didn't know who we were going to have on because they wanted something very specific. I pinged her on IM. Immediately I didn't even know this person before I had her on my podcast, really. She got back to me immediately. Hey, no problem, Derek. I can have such and such do this, and they can do it next week. So it's like those favors that you can get from people. And then there's people that are reaching out from the community that I don't know, that are introducing me to new concepts and things, and we're starting to work together on projects. Then there's customers too. So I've been many times in meetings with customers. For instance, I had a meeting with a customer on the East Coast, and they do a lot of contracting with the government, and just to be as vague as possible. And they were interested in VR technology, and they were asking me questions about VR technology. That's not something I know much about. I'm on the data and AI side, but I had just interviewed the senior program manager, senior design manager for the HoloLens like 3 weeks prior. And Charlotte Pereira, she sits in Canada, I believe. And we had an amazing discussion around how VR is helping, these headsets, augmented reality, are helping folks, women, the diverse workforce in manufacturing environments work with tools better. And specifically with this customer, Packard, they build trucks. And she talked about going to this factory and looking at how people were using this equipment, and how certain equipment was built specifically for males because the size of the equipment. A young Latino woman may not be able to use that piece of equipment just because of the different way it's augmented. So all that entire episode and all the data I gleaned from it, the learning, I brought to that discussion on the East, with this customer in real time. And that made a much better conversation. And I'll tell you, Ryan, that happens probably 4 or 5 times a week, where I'm like, oh, hey, you're talking about, the data science pipeline. Did you know that this concept does this? Or have you heard about Databricks and doing, real-time transformations in Spark or whatever? I didn't know any of that information, before I interviewed someone on Databricks, which is a startup. It's a Spark technology software.
Yeah.
So bringing all those ideas together from episodes in real time, and having our leadership see that, and then posting this stuff on social, and having, my boss's boss see me posting things about our products and being a thought leader. You get noticed, you become visible, and it's a great way to climb your way into a new platform of visibility in whatever organization you're in, whether you want to do it internally or you want to do it externally if you're an entrepreneur or you're the owner of a startup.
I'm noticing a couple of themes that came out of there. One, I like to think every time I do a new episode, I make a new friend. Yep. Because there's something about doing a live interview. We're having a live conversation, Derek and I, right now. And it's different than if we had done this in an email exchange. Like, I get to see your face. It feels like you become friends after you do one of these. And like a number of the other people I've done live streams with, we've flip-flopped and done live streams on their shows or collaborated on some other things. And so that's kind of fun. That learning part of it is huge. Just talking to other people who are experts and get excited about some topic. I always like to say and tell guests, I really don't care what you talk about, as long as just talk about what gets you excited, because that's what I want to learn about. And then the other one is, having these things and the ability to put stuff out on social, it can get you noticed, and it can be good for your career and boosting you up. So those are kind of the 3 themes I just pulled out of your answer there. And they're all great reasons that you can notice, or that you can, great benefits you can get from a show. Going back to our previous question about it's okay if you miss an episode, Ali said, just do your best is the way to go.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Ali. Is an incredible person and colleague. And I actually, so this is the funny thing, going back to how this has helped my career and helped me. I met Ali a few years back, and he helped bring a demo. He actually helped build an artificial pancreas for his son,
Oh,
who
wow.
who has a diabetic condition. And he was doing this, and he had an analytics dashboard pulled up, and he did this with open source technology with this entire community. And we were talking to a healthcare provider, and he was talking about the power of open source and the power of data and how he helped his son. And I'm sitting there in the meeting like, oh my gosh, this is great. We talked together after the meeting. I did a podcast with him. I got way closer with him during the podcast episode. And then now me and him co-host a show together. So, and we're very close friends, and I love working with him. So that relationship was built because of that podcast episode. So I can't even tangibly pinpoint all the things that it's really helped in my life and my career and the direction of how I spend my time. But it's super vast, and there's a lot of things that happen that you just don't understand or know how they could be coming to you.
Yeah, and you don't want to do your show because you think you can get favors from your guests. And I know that's not what you're saying, but there's a relationship that forms after you're doing a show that either side, I mean, you could go back to that person and you could ask them things, advice and stuff. And it's like if you have a friend, you can ask favors of your friends. And when you have people on your show as guests, there's friendships that form there. And it's like you said, even if it's a year down the road, you can come back and say, hey, I ran into somebody that really falls in your area of expertise. Can you help me out with this? Or can you point me in the direction? And so you kind of build this community of people who've been on my show that I can reach out to, or they can reach out to me. That's kind of neat. Trying to figure out which questions I want to finish up. Since you were talking about Ali, this is one of the things I wanted to discuss. So I do my show, I'm the interviewer, and you're the interviewee. You do a live show with Ali, Simply Tech Live. Is that what it's called?
Yep, Simply Tech Live. Yeah.
And so yesterday, you did a show, and for those that are watching, they did a show about virtual reality and racism, and they had a couple of academic professors on it who were doing some pretty cool research in this. But I wanted to talk about what's the process that you go through to build or to put on a show that has two co-hosts and two guests. Is it different than just doing one-on-one interview? Talk about that. What's the process to get that all together and pull that off? Because it was great yesterday.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ryan. And for those that want to check out the episode, we'll post some links in the comments of this live stream, so you can check out Courtney Cogburn's work. She's an associate professor at Columbia University for social work, and it's her project along with this gentleman, Jeremy Bailenson from Stanford. So definitely I'll post that. That was a super amazing episode. So me and Ali have different styles. I think that's what it's like to partner with someone, whether you're two organizations partnering or you're two co-hosts partnering. He's got a completely different style. He's very impromptu, casual. He's very unbothered by certain things, where I'm super extremely structured and I worry about a lot of stuff. And he's kind of the person that's like, don't worry about this. Let's just go. Let's just execute. He's very execute minded. He's a developer and a technologist at heart. Or I am not. I have more of a business background. So I think we bring together our strengths and we fill each other's weaknesses with those strengths. And like, I want to make this thing super, super structured and put all this work into it. He's like, look, like, let's just go with the flow and be very organic. So it's just a great collaboration. And I think even when we prepare for these different shows, we both kind of put in our 2 cents and make sure that whatever the objective is met. We've never disagreed on anything. Oddly, it's like we only kind of positively prop ourselves up for the final objective of creating a really great show. And that's just the way that we get along. But for instance, yesterday's show, beforehand, I think the day before, Ali called me on just on the fly, said, hey, what do you think about this? I think you should probably ask the questions, and I'll moderate because of X reasons. I thought about it and I said, that's awesome, but I'd love if you could kick us off in the beginning, maybe come on the backside of the interview, mention the HoloLens and what you're doing at the Microsoft Technology Center to support this anti-racism experience through VR and HoloLens. He's like, great, that's what I'll do. So it was just very easy. I don't know how others collaborate, but we approach it, and since it is a live discussion, we want it to be informal. We don't want it to be, hello, this is your question, number 1, 2, 3. And I think in the beginning it's like that because you know how it is, Ryan, like you're kind of nervous. You don't really know this person very well. But then throughout the episode, it starts to massage down into a lot more fluid experience, and it starts to get really fun. And I think it starts to get really fun, like right at the 35, 40 minute mark where you really know your guest. And that's it. So it's for us, it's very casual.
Yeah. One of the nice things you mentioned in there, and this is when you have two co-hosts, one of the things you did good yesterday with Ali is Ali wasn't on the screen most of the time. Ali was just behind the scenes dealing with the comments that were coming in online, and I don't know what else Ali was doing behind the scenes, because there are things that happen during a live show. You got to watch comments and you got to pay attention to those. And the more audience you've got coming in and the more comments coming in, it can be really distracting for the interviewer, trying to keep up with what's the audience asking. And I still want to listen to the person I'm interviewing. So that can be difficult. But then at the end, you brought Ali back in because there was some discussion that focused around what he was talking about. Anyhow, it was neat to see that work out well and to be done well. So kudos to you for that. I have just a couple other questions because we're getting close to our timeline here.
And just one quick comment, Ryan. In the past, and you can also switch those roles. So in the past, we were talking about something super technical, and Ali has a technical background. So you can rely on the strengths of the host and then take that position of the moderator or the organizer or the MC and let that person that's closer to whatever the topic is kind of run the questioning of the topic. So the good thing is that having two co-hosts is you can switch back and forth.
Yeah. So tip to everybody, co-host is maybe a good idea. I haven't tried it, but maybe I should. It makes a lot of sense, like in a business setting where, you've got a couple of people at the business that are fired up about doing this and doing it together. All right. I'm going to jump into, I think I'm going to go with this question. I had a couple more queued up. What's the question that you wish I would have asked you?
The question that I wish, man, that's hard. I end my podcasts with, if you had 7 days and unlimited resources, what would you focus on? And I like those types of questions because it brings out what that person is passionate about. I think if you were to ask, hey, what do you struggle with? What's the biggest thing that you struggle with the podcast personally? How have you overcome that struggle? I think the adversity of like having to do a lot of work. I mean, there's a lot of, there's been times my wife's like, look, like you have a family, like you can't spend all Saturday morning editing a podcast. And then there's been a financial discussion where we have a budget of the podcast. So, we're saving for certain things in our family, and I'm allocating a sizable portion of our budget into equipment, into subscriptions, into all these different things. My time is getting taken up. We're thinking about getting a podcast engineer to edit the episodes. There's a lot of time that goes into that analysis. Is that going to be worth it? So I think from a financial perspective and a time spend perspective, like really understanding what's under the hood, I think are important things that people just don't talk about. It's like people always like get on the podcast. Yeah, this is great. This is so easy. It's not a ton of work. It's like, there's a lot of things that go into it. So I think we can probably do another episode completely on that. So I think that's what I wish you would have asked me earlier on, so we could really dive into it. So I think that stuff is important.
Yeah, and that's the stuff that I think I want to talk about on the show, sort of the behind the scenes. And see, you just gave us an idea for another episode down the road. Ali liked the show. That was a comment. Last thing, how do people get a hold of you, Derek? And what do they get a hold of you about? So just talk about that. I'm going to throw your website up here quick.
Yeah, I love how I can actually see Ali's comment. I didn't know StreamYard could do that. We use Social Live. I'm going to have to take that to Social Live. They got some new competition. But people can get a hold of me via LinkedIn. LinkedIn's probably the best way. If you'd like to take a look at the podcast, it's just thedatabinge.com. You can find all the assets for us for our Simply Tech Live show, as well as the Data Binge podcast as company pages in LinkedIn. And I typically respond to almost every single message that comes in, unless you're a recruiter or trying to sell something weird. But yeah, it's best ways to get a hold of me.
Well, thank you. Quick note on that. I've gotten a number of requests lately to buy Bitcoin on LinkedIn, which I never got before, but that's a separate topic. You mentioned recruiters reach out, but people are trying to get me to start buying and selling Bitcoin. And thanks a lot, Derek, for being on the show. Thanks everybody that listened in. Derek, you can hang on the show, but I'm going to end it here real quick. Have a great day and have a great weekend, everybody. And
be safe, everyone.
Yep. And we'll probably be back next Friday.
Thanks, Ryan.